Here is the full article translated and rewritten completely in English. South Australia's final budget before 2026 election, a balancing act between stability and missed opportunity. South Australia's Premier Peter Malinauskas and Treasurer Stephen Mullighan have unveiled the state's last budget before the 2026 election, a financial plan that walks a careful line between fiscal responsibility and political pragmatism. The day unfolded with political theater, policy analysis, and sharp reactions from across the community. It was a budget that aimed to be responsible, yet was quickly met with criticism for lacking boldness. Premier Malinauskas presented the budget as a commitment to stability, declaring it a budget for the people, with a strong focus on public health, transport, housing, and support for vulnerable groups. Treasurer Mullighan echoed that sentiment, describing it as measured and practical. But social services and health advocates quickly stepped forward to express disappointment. Ross Womersley, CEO of the South Australian Council of Social Service (SACOSS), said the budget did not go far enough in addressing the growing cost of living pressures. "We asked the government to be bold, and they weren't," he said bluntly. Womersley acknowledged some positive steps, particularly in housing and public transport, which he said would be a useful contribution to families, especially those with children reliant on buses and trains. However, he pointed out that the budget fails to address one of the biggest burdens on low-income households: energy. There's no support for energy efficiency. Low-income households can't afford solar panels or batteries, the very things that could protect them from rising electricity bills, Womersley said. The health sector also voiced concern, despite the government's commitment of an additional $1.9 billion over 5 years. According to health officials, most of that figure, $1.7 billion, will be used to keep up with existing demand, not to expand or reform the system. Bernadette Mulholland, Chief Industrial Officer of the South Australian Salaried Medical Officers Association, said there were no new measures to grow the state's medical workforce, a critical gap at a time when hospitals are overwhelmed and staff are burnt out. Australian Medical Association SAW President Associate Professor Peter Subramaniam welcomed the funding but said, "We still have ambulance ramping. We still have patients waiting for surgery. There's a disconnect between record investments and actual outcomes." Subramaniam also criticized the lack of discussion around payroll tax, which affects many private healthcare providers. He said this oversight continues to hinder efficiency and service delivery in the sector. In child protection, there was mixed reaction. The budget included a previously announced $2 million increase in staffing for the Child Abuse Report line. However, it also revealed that an additional $85.1 million will be required over the next 4 years for out-of-home care services. While welcomed by some, child protection advocates argued that systemic issues in the department remain unaddressed. Funding alone, they said, won't be enough. ABC journalist Rachel Merritt, who attended the budget lock-up, summarized the announcement as cautious, careful, and calculated. But, as she noted, the mood outside government circles was far more critical. Many South Australians expected more, particularly during a time of high inflation and rising economic anxiety. The state is grappling with a housing crisis, long hospital wait times, and growing public pressure on energy bills and social services. Yet this budget makes no radical changes. It is not a reformist statement. Instead, it is a budget built on predictability. The Premier defended this strategy, arguing that South Australians need stability during uncertain times. "We're building capacity, we're investing responsibly, and we're doing so without overextending the state's finances," Malinauskas said. Still, opposition leaders seized on the opportunity to call the budget uninspiring and visionless. They argued it lacks the transformative thinking required to truly improve lives. For example, on housing, while there are initiatives to improve access and affordability, critics argue that the scale of investment still does not match the scale of the problem. On energy, there's no major investment in renewables for everyday consumers. There's no direct relief for skyrocketing bills. And while big industry continues to receive support, small households are once again left waiting. Public transport, however, saw some wins. Measures such as reduced fares for students and family-friendly transport policies were seen as genuine steps in the right direction. Still, Even here, Womersley pointed out that transport improvements won't solve the underlying cost crisis for many struggling families. As the 2026 election approaches, this budget will be a defining document. It is not just about money, it's about priorities, values, and direction. Will voters reward caution, or will they punish it for lacking courage? The answer depends on what happens between now and Election Day. Will the health system improve? Will the housing shortage ease? Will energy bills go down? Because if the answer is no, then this budget will be seen as a missed opportunity. It was a day of mixed feelings, with praise for some policies, but frustration over what was left out. This was not a revolutionary budget. It was a maintenance budget, and in times of stress, that may not be enough. Still, the Premier and Treasurer remain optimistic. They believe voters will appreciate responsibility over recklessness. But critics argue that inaction can be just as dangerous. For now, the people of South Australia will weigh the evidence. This budget sets the tone for the next 2 years, and perhaps the election result that follows. Let me know if you'd like a viral headline, description, tags, and hashtags for this story next.